Lovisa sneered at me after I announced I was quitting my job. I didn't say anything back, but just stared at her quietly. We had been talking about the company's decision to cut labor costs. Lovisa especially disliked the people who were supposedly taking advantage of overtime pay. Johnson also seemed happy about the idea of saving money. A week later, my phone rang constantly with calls from the company. When I finally answered, the president asked me sharply, "Who exactly are you?" I couldn't help but laugh mockingly. I introduced myself as Astrid, a 57-year-old employee who had been working for the company for 35 years since I graduated from college. I explained that our company provided administrative services, especially for busy company presidents, and we handled clerical work and specialized in tax matters. I proudly told him that I managed 43 clients, a responsibility that had become overwhelming even with the help of a part-timer. Despite the challenges, I had to stay strong. Our clients had been with us for a long time, and their problems only made me more determined. Today, as I sat in front of my computer, I thought about the constant harassment from Johnson and Lovisa. Johnson, who was 5 years younger than me and now the head of the tax department, had changed a lot since his promotion 3 months ago. He used to be polite, but now he was condescending and always complaining, making every interaction difficult. Even when I argued back, he didn't care. He would just tell me to read the manual for guidance and warn me not to take unnecessary actions. Lovisa, Johnson's assistant, joined in the harassment. She criticized my efficiency and mocked my lower rank, even though she didn't know that I had declined a promotion to department head. I kept doing my regular duties, but their harassment continued. Johnson accused me of working too much overtime and called it a waste. Lovisa agreed with him and said my constant overtime was hurting the performance of the entire tax department. The real reason I was working so much overtime was that Johnson had unexpectedly left a month's worth of client files on my desk, and they all needed to be filed by the end of the month. After work, I felt drained as I looked at the files in front of me. "Wait, these all have deadlines this month, right?" I said in confusion. But before I could understand the situation, Johnson was already packing up his desk, not interested in addressing my concerns. "I'm heading out, take care," he said casually as he left the office quickly. Lovisa followed him and added insult to injury with a mocking laugh. The situation was unbelievable, and I sighed heavily as I opened the client files scattered on my desk. To my dismay, some of the files were originally Lovisa's responsibility. Realizing this made me sigh even deeper. I understood now why Johnson had been harassing me so relentlessly. They wanted me to retire quickly. My extensive experience and deep knowledge of taxation made me a preferred resource for other members of the tax department over Johnson. Johnson's unapproachable demeanor and unattractive appearance made everyone, except Lovisa, avoid him. It seemed Lovisa stayed close to him strategically, driven by Johnson's preference for younger female employees. The shallow nature of their thinking sent a chill down my spine. Lovisa's harassment wasn't just a personal grudge. She wanted to impress Johnson, who was evaluating the tax department's performance. Despite these challenges, I had to manage the declarations and prepare tax reports for my assigned companies. Today seemed especially busy, and I knew claiming overtime would only lead to more complaints from Johnson and Lovisa, so I resigned myself to working extra hours without pay. Unexpectedly, I was summoned to the president's office. Our company had recently undergone a leadership change because the former president fell ill suddenly. The new president, who was the former president's son, wasn't very familiar with our company yet. As I entered the office, I saw Johnson and Lovisa smirking unpleasantly. In a tense atmosphere, the president dropped a bombshell. "Lily, we need you to resign by the end of this month." My mind spun as I asked for clarification. Johnson and Lovisa had accused me of overbilling for overtime, claiming that while others had around 13 hours, I had exceeded 78 hours. The president, unaware of the true circumstances, seemed impressed with Johnson and Lovisa's zero overtime. The reality of the situation hit me hard. The inflated overtime was because I was doing both Johnson's and Lovisa's work. However, revealing Johnson's instructions would make it look like I couldn't manage my time effectively. I presented the facts, asserting that I hadn't overstated my overtime but had struggled to finish my workload within regular hours. The president sighed deeply, expressing doubt but acknowledging the lack of evidence to pursue the matter further. Nevertheless, he insisted that they couldn't keep someone who worked at such a slow pace. Resigned to the situation, I accepted his suggestion to resign by the end of the month. Leaving the company I had devoted 35 years to felt disheartening. Despite my dedication, the additional workload from Johnson and Lovisa went unappreciated. I agreed to resign, knowing I had already communicated my decision to the president. As I glanced at Johnson and Lovisa, their vulgar smiles reflected satisfaction. Leaving the president's office, Lovisa taunted me with a sarcastic, "Thanks for quitting," her sneer cutting deep. I responded with a silent stare, facing similar disdain from Johnson, who approved of cutting labor costs and labeled me as someone exploiting overtime pay. As they chatted cheerfully, I pondered the handover process. I created documents for all my clients, ensuring proper farewells and appointments with those I could meet personally. Unable to schedule a meeting with the president, I resorted to writing letters to inform them of my successor. A week after my resignation, while enjoying a moment of relaxation at home, my mobile phone rang. Seeing the company's number, I hesitated, having already completed my social insurance procedures. However, persistent calls from both the company and Johnson and Lovisa's personal mobiles led me to answer reluctantly. As I picked up, the president urgently asked, "Who exactly are you?" I couldn't help but reply mockingly, "Just an unemployed lady." After I resigned from the company, I thought that was the end of it. But then the president urgently called me, explaining that chaos had erupted since my departure. They had received 47 calls from clients wanting to stop doing business with the company. He sounded panicked and pleaded for my immediate return. Reluctantly, I got up and went back to the company. When I arrived, I found Johnson and Lovisa waiting for me. They looked exhausted, with pale faces and dark circles under their eyes. Surprised by how much they had changed, I asked what was happening. Johnson glared at me and said, "Since you left, we've been bombarded with calls to stop transactions. Not just from your clients, but also from prospective companies we were planning to introduce. What did you do?" Lovisa echoed his suspicion, looking disappointed as if she thought I had done something underhanded. Even though I hadn't manipulated the clients, I had a hunch about why the transactions had stopped. I mumbled my thoughts aloud, but Johnson accused me of orchestrating it. He demanded I go to the president's office immediately and forcefully escorted me there. When we entered the president's office, the president gave me a direct look. Johnson announced, "President, I brought her," with an air of authority, while Lovisa followed closely behind. Ignoring their accusatory tone, the president asked me about the abrupt halt in transactions after my departure. I took a deep breath and explained, "Our clients don't need us to manage their taxes. There are tax accountant firms that offer cheaper services. They stayed with us because of me." Johnson snapped back, questioning my worth, and Lovisa taunted me, both challenging my value to the company. Undeterred, I elaborated on my unique approach, offering tailored tax-saving strategies that resonated with our clients. Johnson dismissed it as inefficient, arguing that their manual-based operations were more practical. The president sighed deeply, recognizing the fundamental difference in our approaches. In a serious tone, he said, "Actually," signaling a crucial revelation. I received a surprising call from my father, the former president. It turns out that some clients who had stopped transactions went directly to Dad to negotiate on your behalf. I hadn't anticipated clients going to such lengths for me. Dad emphasized that the tax department thrived because of my contributions. Not only did I manage my clients efficiently, but I also supported my colleagues' clients with knowledge that even Johnson couldn't match. Dad disclosed that if I hadn't declined the promotion, I would have held a higher position than a department head by now. The current president expressed regret with a pained expression. Lovisa appeared shocked, probably grappling with the idea that I could have been her superior. The president apologized for making me resign initially and asked if I would consider revoking my resignation. According to Dad, I was indispensable to the company. While I appreciated the change in the president's perspective, I hesitated to accept. Johnson interrupted our conversation, visibly upset, and protested the president's decision, questioning why I was chosen over him. Lovisa echoed his sentiments, praising Johnson's leadership and expressing disbelief at the preference for me. The president then sternly addressed them, revealing that since my resignation, numerous complaints had been received from the tax department, suggesting they had been shifting their workload onto others. Johnson's face turned pale as the president exposed the fact that he had been pushing the preparation of client declaration forms onto his subordinates, including making Lovisa do work for multiple clients. The president pointed out the irony, considering Johnson had accused me of being a salary thief. As Johnson and Lovisa's faces grew paler, the president revealed another issue, a rumor about their romantic involvement. Johnson struggled to defend himself, claiming he was just mentoring Lovisa as her superior. However, the president produced receipts from the accounting department showing dining expenses filed by Johnson. Confronted with this evidence, Johnson began sweating and couldn't provide a convincing explanation. Lovisa also turned ghostly pale as the president accused them of neglecting their duties, inflating expense claims, and violating company policy by having an affair in the office while being married. In a calm and straightforward manner, the president declared their employment terminated effective immediately. Johnson and Lovisa tried to resist, promising to retract the receipt claims and pleading for their jobs. "I have a family," Johnson desperately pleaded, attempting to reverse his termination. Lovisa echoed his sentiments, expressing her fear of being fired and promising to apologize to me and others for burdening them with work. Realizing the gravity of the situation, she begged for a second chance. Sensing their desperation, I offered some advice. "Why don't you stop resisting? It's undignified," I suggested. Johnson glared at me and retorted, "Shut up. What would a single person like you understand?" I sighed and reminded him, "Johnson, you are the one who got me fired. It's just karma. What goes around comes around. Why don't you take some responsibility and reflect a bit?" Frustrated, Johnson looked away while Lovisa bit her lip in distress. Aware of more details about their misconduct, I turned to the president and asked with a smile if I should share them. Johnson and Lovisa frantically tried to stop me, fearing further exposure. I issued an ultimatum, warning them that their wrongdoings would eventually come to light and urging them to face reality before it worsened. At my words, both Johnson and Lovisa collapsed to their knees, and the president decided to fire them on the spot. Later, I revealed more about their misdeeds, including Johnson faking business trips to spend days with Lovisa and their insidious tactics of harassing disliked employees into quitting. Despite my attempts to help those employees, Johnson and Lovisa's strategies were relentless. They repeatedly reprimanded and pressured employees out of my sight, often assigning sudden tasks with tight deadlines. The resigned employees had initially asked me to keep quiet, but since they were now happily working elsewhere, I decided it was time to speak up. The president, furious at my revelations, expressed anger and considered cutting Johnson and Lovisa's final salaries. He planned to thoroughly investigate past inflated expense claims. Johnson, with tears in his eyes, begged the president not to cut his salary, fearing the impact on his family. As the truth unraveled, Johnson's affair with Lovisa came to light, leading to Johnson's divorce. The two now faced claims for compensation in the divorce lawsuit, marking the consequential aftermath of their actions. I became aware of the situation when Johnson reached out to me, seeking assistance in persuading the president to reconsider their firing. Johnson and Lovisa found themselves in dire straits. Despite their efforts, they struggled to secure new jobs in the tax industry. The industry's close-knit nature meant that word of their misdeeds spread rapidly, making potential employers hesitant to hire them. Desperate for income to cover divorce compensation and living expenses, they resorted to day labor at construction sites, a stark departure from their previous office roles. Lovisa would often call me in tears, pleading for help. "Lily, please help. I only wanted a better life, and I never truly liked Johnson," she cried. However, I couldn't ignore the fact that their predicament was a consequence of their own actions. Many, including myself, had been impacted by their behavior. I reminded Lovisa that the consequences were a result of her choices. "You can't unring a bell," I told her firmly. Facing hardships was the consequence of her decisions. Lovisa's despair echoed through her protests, but despite her regrets, the outcome remained unchanged. As for me, I chose to distance myself from the chaos of the corporate world. Despite the president's pleas for my return, I declined. Once told to resign, I had no desire to go back. Instead, I found solace in assisting at a friend's tax office, supplementing my income, and enjoying a more relaxed lifestyle. In the future, I entertained the idea of starting my own office where I could serve my clients without the constraints of corporate bureaucracy. In my own space, I could fully dedicate myself to my clients' needs. As a tax accountant, I aspired to be on equal footing with my clients, providing service without superiority. This marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one filled with excitement and opportunities to pursue what truly mattered to me. My second life had just begun, and I eagerly anticipated the journey ahead. I became aware of the situation when Johnson reached out to me, seeking assistance in persuading the president to reconsider their firing. Johnson and Lovisa found themselves in dire straits. Despite their efforts, they struggled to secure new jobs in the tax industry. The industry's close-knit nature meant that word of their misdeeds spread rapidly, making potential employers hesitant to hire them. Desperate for income to cover divorce compensation and living expenses, they resorted to day labor at construction sites, a stark departure from their previous office roles. Lovisa would often call me in tears, pleading for help. "Lily, please help. I only wanted a better life, and I never truly liked Johnson," she cried. However, I couldn't ignore the fact that their predicament was a consequence of their own actions. Many, including myself, had been impacted by their behavior. I reminded Lovisa that the consequences were a result of her choices. "You can't unring a bell," I told her firmly. Facing hardships was the consequence of her decisions. Lovisa's despair echoed through her protests, but despite her regrets, the outcome remained unchanged. As for me, I chose to distance myself from the chaos of the corporate world. Despite the president's pleas for my return, I declined. Once told to resign, I had no desire to go back. Instead, I found solace in assisting at a friend's tax office, supplementing my income, and enjoying a more relaxed lifestyle. In the future, I entertained the idea of starting my own office where I could serve my clients without the constraints of corporate bureaucracy. In my own space, I could fully dedicate myself to my clients' needs. As a tax accountant, I aspired to be on equal footing with my clients, providing service without superiority. This marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one filled with excitement and opportunities to pursue what truly mattered to me. My second life had just begun, and I eagerly anticipated the journey ahead. During this time, I started building a network of clients who appreciated my dedication and personal touch. I attended seminars and workshops to stay updated on the latest tax laws and strategies, ensuring that my services were top-notch. Word of mouth spread quickly, and soon I had a steady stream of clients who valued my expertise and commitment. With my growing success, I was able to invest in better tools and software, making my work more efficient and accurate. I also hired a small team to help manage the increasing workload. My new office was a place of positivity and collaboration, a stark contrast to the toxic environment I had left behind. One day, while reviewing files, I received an unexpected visit from the president of my former company. He looked weary and contrite. "Lily, I need to apologize," he said. "I realize now how much you contributed to our success. We've been struggling since you left, and it's clear that we underestimated your value." I listened as he detailed the challenges the company faced without me. He offered me a generous contract to return, but I politely declined. "I've found happiness and fulfillment in my new path," I explained. "I appreciate the offer, but I believe I'm where I need to be." The president nodded, understanding my decision. As he left, I felt a sense of closure. My journey had come full circle, and I was finally at peace with the choices I had made. As my business continued to thrive, I decided to give back to the community. I began offering free tax workshops for small businesses and low-income individuals, helping them navigate the complexities of taxes and financial planning. This initiative brought me immense satisfaction, knowing I was making a positive impact on others' lives. Looking back, I realized that my hardships had led me to a place of strength and independence. The trials I faced had shaped me into a more resilient and compassionate person. I was proud of the life I had built and the person I had become. My story was one of redemption and reinvention. I had turned adversity into opportunity, creating a life that was not only successful but also meaningful. And as I looked toward the future, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I had the courage and determination to face them head-on. My second life was just beginning, and the possibilities were endless.